Mr. Bowman, you've talked about these overtime hours. I guess you're saying that there are 20 or so hours of overtime that were paid that should not have been paid?
That is what the records indicate.
Okay. And that's for one employee, is that correct?
Correct.
How many employees are there in the city of Villa Hills?
On average, about 14.
And how many other employees' records did you examine?
Well, in the process of compiling the records, I guess you could say I pretty much looked at almost all of them.
Almost all of them. Who did you not look at?
Whomever was not on the same page as Mr. Schutzman.
Whoever was not on the same page as Mr. Schutzman, you didn't look at their hours? What do you mean by that, the same page? The same page in the report?
Correct. The access payroll reports that were provided have multiple employees listed on the same page. And depending on where this employee was on that page, you would either have, sometimes you have some employees above them, some employees below them.
And some of the employees were not on that page?
Correct.
And where were they? On another page?
Yes,
Did you have access to the other page?
I did.
And you didn't look at their overtime hours because they were on the second page?
I was not compiling their records for the health state audit.
And who determined what records you would compile for the state auditor?
The state auditor in their request to the city.
They requested one page of records?
They requested the record, all payroll and timesheet records of a particular employee.
Okay. And so you don't know whether other employees were either overpaid or underpaid overtime because you were looking at this one employee?
That would be accurate.
Okay. So there might have been other errors in public works, there might have been other errors in the police department?
Could have been.
And one of your criticisms of Chief Goodenough seems to be that the records were, the hours were misreported. There are some essentially miscalculations.
I wouldn't know how to quantify them.
What you're saying, now over what period of time did you look?
The state auditor asked us to provide all records from January of 2011 until the time of their request, which was April of 2013.
Okay, so from January of 2011 to April of 2013, your Exhibit 7, I believe, indicates a total error of 14 and a half hours.
Net, yes.
Okay, net, because there were some overpayments and underpayments.
Correct.
And you netted out the 14 and a half.
Correct.
And so can we subtract between January of 2011 to April of 2013, Detective or Assistant Chief Schutzman worked approximately how many hours in a month?
I don't recall off the top of my head.
Well, was it 40 hours per week, do you know?
No, well over that.
So approximately 200 hours a month?
I would have to go through and add them up.
Well, you're saying it's well over 40 hours a week.
Sure,
Right.
absolutely, correct.
And that would mean well over 160 in a month, because there's 4+ weeks in a month.
Okay.
So wouldn't you think 200 is a rough approximation at least?
No, wait, more than that.
Oh, more than that. Okay, let's just use 200. So between January of 2011 and April of 2013, I believe is 28 months. Okay? And 28 months and 200 hours a month would be $5,600. And so out of 5,600 hours that he worked, you're telling us that roughly 14.5 improperly approved by Chief Goodenough? So 14.5 hours out of a minimum of $5,600?
I don't know about the minimum number, but that 14.5 number is the number that is reflected in the records of the city.
Right, and it's very important that these records be accurate, is that right?
Yes.
And even when you were doing your math for the council's, or for the mayor's attorney, in preparing this, you doing the math was very important, is that correct?
I don't understand the question.
Well, you would not have wanted to make an error in anything you were going to present to the council, would you?
I try not to.
And you knew that your calculations were supposed to be provided to Chief Goodenogh's lawyers, is that correct?
I did not know what documents were going to be provided where.
Okay, but you provided your summary report, your calculation to Mr. McMurtry sometime last week.
Correct.
Okay. And when he was asking you questions, he kind of skipped over it. It's behind tab 5, actually, was your first calculation of the hours that were in error. Is it not? If you look in exhibit number 5, Mr. McMurtry asked you about the first 3 pages. Then he asked you to flip to the 6th page on about the building permits. And he had you skip the calculations that are actually behind tab number 5. Now tell the ladies and gentlemen of the council, who did the calculations that are reflected on the 4th page of exhibit number 5?
I
Now tell the council whether or not this and you gave this to Mr. McMurtry, is that correct?
Correct.
Last week.
I believe so.
Now tell the ladies and gentlemen of the council whether or not that document, and I'll represent the hearing officer, that this is the document that we received pursuant to the city's obligation. Tell them whether that's looks like the same calculations you performed and you presented as exhibit number 7.
They are different.
And when did you realize that you made a miscalculation?
Objection. He just said they are different. And established if there is a miscalculation, maybe there is.
Well,
There is.
okay, the purpose of exhibit 5 was to calculate the number of overtime hours that were improperly paid, is that correct?
I'm sorry, say again, please.
The purpose of the document, the 4th page in exhibit 5, was to calculate the number of hours that were improperly paid as overtime out of these 5,600 plus hours. And you came up with 14 point, or some number, what was it? The first time you ran this?
21.
21. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And what is exhibit number 7, which relates to the same subject, different than exhibit 5, page 4?
It is.
Now, why is it, first of all, do you know whether this was ever provided, exhibit 7 was ever provided to Chief Goodenogh's attorneys prior to being handed this exhibit book tonight?
I do not know.
Okay. Do you know why exhibit 7 is different than page 4 of exhibit 5?
Because the payroll records that have been provided that form the basis of these documents, as the state auditor has routinely reported in the state auditor's report, are confusing, incomplete, and difficult to make reliable statements of.
So are you saying that you were confused, this was difficult, and you made an unreliable report to us when you gave us exhibit 5, page 4, and you later had to change it?
No, what I'm saying is that this was based off of the best information I had, and then upon further review and collecting further background information, was able to make adjustments and identify a more accurate number.
And where are these records that you looked at? Have they been provided to Chief Goodenough, do you know?
I don't know, because it's not my job to provide records to Chief Goodenough.
Did you provide the background, the supporting detail to Mr. McMurtry, the council's attorney?
I did.
Okay? But in any event, between whenever you did the first calculation and when you did the second calculation, you realized that there were mistakes in your first calculation.
I realized that there was missing information, and the additional information changed the result.
So did somebody provide you with additional information between your first calculation and your second calculation?
I reviewed documents that I quite frankly probably hadn't reviewed in several months.
I'm sorry, you reviewed some documents to prepare page 4 of Exhibit 5, right? And you made
Correct.
some calculations.
Correct.
And when did you review those documents?
I reviewed a single document right before I provided this report, which was my own notes of discrepancies.
And when had you made those notes of discrepancies? Prior to the auditor contacting you or after?
No, it was as part of doing the audit report.
Okay, but sometime between middle of last week and tonight, you redid your summary
Yeah.
to make it more accurate.
Correct.
So somehow, whether it's your fault or somebody else's fault, there are discrepancies between these two documents.
Yes, although I would say this is a draft.
The page 4 of Exhibit 5 was a draft? Does it indicate draft on any place?
No, sir.
Did you tell Mr. McMurtry it was a draft?
No, sir.
All right. Now, you also talked about these building permits you couldn't find. That was, first of all, do you know how long Chief Goodenough was in charge of the building inspector?
According to Executive Order 2010-01, directly responsible for building and zoning inspection would have been December of 2010 until it was reverted at the end of May of 2011.
Okay, so that's 18 months, is that correct?
Roughly, yes.
Now, all of these, so who was responsible for the building inspector prior to December of 2010?
The building inspector
Did the building inspector report to anyone?
reported to council.
Did he or she report to the mayor?
I would assume so.
And do you know who that building inspector was?
Mr. Schutz.
And do you know who the building inspector was after May of 2011?
After May of 2011, still Mr. Schutz.
And has anyone succeeded Mr. Schutzman?
In May of 2013, building and zoning inspection is now handled by NKAPC.
Okay, and all of these missing building inspection reports, since we're here tonight to talk about Chief Goodenough, are all of these missing building reports for the period in which he was in charge between December of 2010 and May of 2011?
Not all of them, no. Most of them, yes.
Most of them?
Yes.
So if we look at your Exhibit 5, the first page, you'll see you have this itemized, right?
Yes.
Number 1 is missing the monthly reports for May of 2013, October of 2009, September of 2008, and December of 2008.
Correct.
None of those are under Chief Goodenough's watch.
That's incorrect.
Which one of those are under Chief Goodenough's watch?
May of 2013.
Did Mr. Schutzman report directly to the Chief of Police in May of 2013?
As building inspector, yes.
Yeah, isn't it from December of 2010 to May of 2011? He reported to Chief Goodenough.
You are correct.
So item number 1, none of those missing documents you can lay at the feet of Chief Goodenough. Is that correct? And that forms part of the basis for the suggestion to remove them.
Those are 5-year records. Those are records that should have been maintained within the city, and they should have been as a part of the city records.
Well, it says, sir, it doesn't say missing the monthly reports for May of 2013, October of 2009, September of 2008, and December of 2008. The monthly reports,
Correct.
were those reports done under the direction of Chief Goodenough?
No.
Okay. How about number 2? You say missing 74 permits beginning in May of 2008. So let's just tighten up the time frame a little bit. Between May of 2008 and December of 2010, okay, before Chief Goodenough took over, how many of those 74 permits occurred during that period?
I would have to go through the list and count them, but if you also note, there is an asterisk and it says permits. It says that there were 20 missing permits during the time period of Executive Order 2010-01.
Okay, so 20. And then you talk about missing an additional 50 permits from May of 2002 to April of 2008.
Right.
Were those under Chief Goodenough's watch?
They were not.
Do you know who, okay, strike there. Likewise, in number 5, you say missing all records of any property destroyed from April of 2002 to May of 2013. Would you agree with me that between April of 2002 and December of 2010, those records were not under Chief Goodenough's watch?
Yes.
And likewise for the period May of 2011 to May of 2013.
Yes.
Did you know the mayor was reprimanded for something to do with destroying documents?
I am not familiar with that.
So you wouldn't know which documents the mayor destroyed if he was reprimanded by council for destroying documents. You wouldn't know whether or not which documents he destroyed, would you?
No.
Okay.
I would note.
You did say you reviewed the minutes from the meetings, didn't you? I thought earlier in your testimony.
There's an objection.
Didn't get to complete his answer.
Okay.
Okay. I would note, you mentioned number 5, the condemnation file, that the building and zoning inspections were under the group of the police department and the chief through May of 2012. Okay.
Okay, but Doctor,
Okay,
you're not saying it.
And the 2344 Amsterdam Road is known to have been destroyed because we have a demolition permit during that time period.
Okay.
And there's no condemnation file that goes with that demolition permit.
And so you're not saying that the ones from April of 2002 to December of 2010 were under Chief Goodenough's watch, are you?
No.
Okay. Now, do you know where these, whose responsibility it is for these missing reports? Who destroyed them?
I don't know if they were destroyed or if they were never made. I don't know because I don't have it.
You don't know. Right? It could be they were made by Detective Schutzman, and they're somehow missing. You don't know whether they were under the supervision of Chief Goodenough and they're missing. And you don't know whether there's some of the documents that were destroyed by the mayor. Do you? You went through the council minutes. You said earlier in your testimony. And you recall seeing the council minutes in which the mayor was reprimanded by a 6-0 vote of this council.
That is not the particular records I was looking at in the minutes. I did not read every single page of every single minute book. What I did was look into the minute book and find only the annual inspection report of the building inspector, found the list of permits that had been issued in the previous year, and compared those records to the records we actually have on site.
Okay.
And noted the records that were missing.
And you weren't even there in May of 2012, right?
Correct.
So you're not trying to suggest to the council that somehow Chief Goodenough did something wrong to cause the missing of these reports, are you?
I am simply noting that these records are not present in the city's records, and that there is a record retention schedule, and the individuals who are in charge of those departments are responsible for maintaining those records.
Now, what responsibility does the clerk's office have with respect to maintaining records?
The clerk's office is the custodian of record. For
The
city.
custodian of building permits?
Custodian of all city records.
So let's not confuse, let's not get too confused because you talked earlier about your confusion about the overtime.
Objection.
These records,
Unnecessarily argumentative.
these records that you say
I
were,
objected, I didn't hear
Okay.
a ruling.
Let's not,
okay.
just keep it to the
The-
questions.
These records that you say were under the supervision of Chief Goodenough between December of 2010 to May of 2011, where do they go from his office?
They're supposed to go to the city clerk's office.
Okay. And so did you talk, who was the city clerk prior to you?
Well, there has not been a city clerk in the city for 2 years before I became city clerk.
But there were people in the city clerk's office that were the custodians of these records?
Correct, a former employee who handled most of the building and zoning work,
And who was that?
Kim Robbins.
Now, did you talk to Kim Robbins in preparing this report to see whether or not Kim Robbins received these reports from the chief of police?
I did not, she was no longer employed with us at the time this report was compiled.
Okay. And so you don't know, you're not suggesting to this council that Chief Goodenough did something wrong with these records, because for all you know, Chief Goodenough maintained those records as he should, and he shipped them to the city clerk's office, and then somehow they're missing. Isn't that correct?
I don't believe so.
Okay, you were employed there. You don't believe so what?
I don't believe that to be an accurate statement, that records were sent over to the city clerk's office even before I got there, and then they somehow went missing or destroyed within the city clerk's office.
Okay, well,
Because
tell
we
me.
because we have records of payments of these permits. And from those records of those permits, I know which documents came into the clerk's office. And that spreadsheet was maintained in part by Ms. Robbins while she was employed, and I still have that document. And it was also maintained by previous city clerks as well.
Right, so somehow they got the documents from the police department.
They've gotten some of those documents. They did not get these documents.
Now, under number 6, you've got missing 22, 41, 64, 98, 116, 128 unknown complaints that you say are missing,
Correct.
and of all of those complaints, none of them were under Chief Goodenough's direction. Isn't that correct?
That would be correct. I think it's important to note that this is simply a list of the building and zoning records that are missing from city records.
And now you understand that the charges against Chief Goodenough are in part based on these missing records, right?
I'm not the one who filed the charges.
Did you consult with the mayor in connection with the filing of the charges?
I did not.
Did he ask you for any information regarding these missing documents?
These were already records that I was working on. I mean, we'd already started an inventory of the missing records because NKAPC continually called us asking for records that we could not find.
Okay, are you suggesting to us in this report that Chief Goodenough is responsible for all of these missing documents between April of 2002 and May of 2013, well before and well after he was no longer responsible for maintaining these records?
And know that he is responsible as the department head, as the person placed in charge of building and zoning by Executive Order 2010-01 for a portion of those records.
And how many records would you estimate are missing?
Again, I answered this question when I was asked this by Mr. McMurtry. I can't put a number on those records.
Are there thousands?
I would say hundreds.
Okay, how many of those hundreds came under his watch?
I would probably say considering that number 7 on this report is a 3-year record of inspection reports and files, I would probably say there's several hundred.
Has anybody been disciplined since May of 2011 for these missing documents besides Chief Goodenough? The ones that have been missing for the period June 2011 to today?
I'm not aware of it.
Who's responsible for maintaining them? The clerk's office?
The clerk's office once we get them.
Okay. You have not received any discipline for failing to maintain or for any missing documents, have you?
I have not.
Now, with respect to the overtime that you calculated, the 13 months of overtime that you testified about, do you recall that testimony?
I do.
Do you know whether council was aware from Mr. Schutzman on a monthly basis that he was accumulating overtime?
I do not, because I have not talked with the council members who were there at the time.
Do you have any information that would indicate that the amount of overtime was not accurate? In other words, do you have any information to indicate that the person claiming the overtime did not actually work those hours?
I have submitted a report that shows there are duplicative hours, and it is not possible to work 2 hours at the same time.
Okay. And duplicative hours, you said you came up with a number of, I believe, $73,000 in overtime pay?
That is the total overtime request that was submitted by this employee for 13 months of back overtime all at once.
And do you remember how many, well, all at once, you say it was submitted all at once, but you don't know whether or not that person apprised council on a monthly basis of his accumulating overtime?
I was not here during that time period, and nor are any of the council members who were present at that time.
Did you know that there was a recommendation to the mayor at one time in order to alleviate the need for overtime, that the city could hire another police officer and eliminate the need for overtime?
I'm not aware of that.
Did you know that the mayor did not act upon the suggestion from council to add another police officer?
I believe you're referencing discussions that occurred before I was hired.
And when you said there were some duplicative hours, right, there was one timesheet or one period where there were 9 hours recorded twice?
Correct, I know, I saw that in the city records.
Okay, how many hours did it take to get up to $73,000 in overtime paid approximately?
Almost 1,300.
1,300. And so out of 1,300 hours of overtime claim, your review indicated that 9 of those hours were duplicative?
That's not correct.
How many hours were duplicative?
Approximately 14 net.
14 net out of 1,300?
Yes.
So about 1% of the hours were duplicative.
I'll take the word for it.
And you're suggesting to council that Chief Goodenough failed in his supervision of the building inspector by not catching those 14 net duplicative hours that you had to calculate twice yourself?
Objection, that's not his testimony. He didn't.
It's like, raise a question.
Well, in your opinion as the clerk, did Chief Goodenough perform appropriate oversight for the 1,286 hours that were properly claimed?
That's not my decision. It's not my call to make that kind of statement, make that kind of a judgment. all I can state is that within that payroll record, there are duplicative hours.
Okay. And as a result of the auditor's report, you say the city tightened its rules to prevent this from happening again.
Correct.
And when did that occur?
This past, well, some of it went into effect as we were adopting into personnel policies back in September and October. And the last move we just made in the last month when we changed the payroll rules.
So when did the former detective / assistant chief submit the request for overtime?
December 29th, 2011.
December of 2011.
Correct.
So you would agree with me that the city at that time knew that the person was submitting a request for 1,300 hours of overtime?
I'm sorry, could you?
The city was aware of that request.
Well, the city received the request.
Was there any change made between December of 2011 and late 2013 to tighten the rules? To question Mr. Schutzman, to question Chief Goodenough, anything like that?
I was not here at that time.
Did you ever ask Chief Goodenough for his explanation of why he failed to catch 9 duplicative hours out of 1,300?
I did not have an opportunity to ask, nor as my role as clerk would it be my responsibility to. I'm not his supervisor.
Well, you were assembling information for the Kentucky auditor, weren't you?
Correct. To the auditor.
Was your role to also tell the auditor any explanation? I mean, wouldn't it have been reasonable when you found mistakes before you presented the information to the auditor to at least get the person who was in charge at that time their explanation as to these hours?
My job was to compile information and provide it to an examiner in the state auditor's office. That examiner was responsible for doing their own investigation. It's not my responsibility to do the state auditor's investigation.
Okay. Do you have any reason to believe from your review of all these records, the minutes, various emails, et cetera, that Chief Goodenough did anything intentionally wrong in order for these 9 hours to be duplicative? Or do you think it was a mistake of some sort?
It's not my judgment call to make that judgment call. I would say that the city records show that the timesheet request was submitted by the employee and it was turned over to the mayor and the administration office to pay the same day. I don't understand how anyone could have possibly taken the time to review 13 months worth of back payroll records and their own access reports to take the time to identify if there were any discrepancies.
They would be paid the same day?
No, they were submitted on that day, and so I don't see how Chief Goodenough, who approved that single overtime request that we reached back for 13 months, could have taken the time to review it and also submit it the same day.
Oh, so you don't see how Chief Goodenough had enough time to review these records to see if there are any duplicates?
I don't think he did.
Okay, because you don't think he had enough time to do it?
I don't see how he could do it when he submitted it on both the same day. The payroll request came in from the employee, the payroll request was forwarded to the administration office the same day.
And someone in the administration office, did they have an opportunity to review the submission for the overtime and determine whether there are any duplicates?
I was not there at the time.
So how long, you weren't there at the time, so how long was it before the person was paid the overtime hours? How long did the city have to check those records?
Well, the payment actually went out in February, and I do believe that the city did object to the payment because the labor cabinet became involved.
And what happened at the labor cabinet?
It is my understanding that, based on the records in the city, that the labor cabinet basically forced the city to pay it.
So the labor cabinet, just so we're all aware, the labor cabinet is an arm of the Commonwealth of Kentucky responsible for enforcing like wage and hour laws, is that correct?
To my knowledge, yes.
And so the same hours that Chief Goodenough apparently reviewed in a very short period of time, the labor cabinet also said should be paid.
And the state auditor's office also said was questionable.
Okay, but the Kentucky Labor Cabinet said they should be paid.
And the state auditor's office said they were questionable.
And the city actually had these records for at least the month of January to check to see if they were duplicative before they paid them.
The payroll records of the city would indicate that would be truthful,
Okay.
that they had them for that period of time.
And who would have had those? Somebody in the clerk's office, someplace in the mayor's office, someplace in the administration office?
Don't know who had those exactly, I was not there at the time.
So all you know is they went from Schutzman to Goodenough, and then from Goodenough to somebody in the city,
To the mayor.
and the mayor had some 30 days or so to check the accuracy of these records and still authorize the payment that included 9 hours of duplicative overtime? And the Kentucky Labor Cabinet agreed that they should be paid.
The records of the city indicate that that timeline is approximately correct.
And you actually pushed back a day for the submission of payroll in order to allow the department head more time to be able to review these records, because previously it was determined that previously they didn't have enough time to review the records fully.
2 days.
Have there been any overtime discrepancies since the payday was pushed back?
Not that I'm aware of.
And when did that occur, the payroll date was pushed back?
Within the last month.
Well, have there been any overtime discrepancies between December of 2011 and today, the year away?
Yes.
And where were those overtime discrepancies?
Usually in the police department's budget, or police department's payroll that was submitted. The access, the officer would report a certain number of hours worked and indicate an overtime amount, and yeah, the access report we would receive from the chief would have a different amount on it.
And what did you do when you found those errors?
Usually the payroll clerk handles this, and the payroll clerk would send a question back to the chief as to what the difference is, and then usually it would get resolved by contacting the employee.
Right, so somehow payroll figured there was a mistake in the submission, and somewhere between the clerk's office and the police department, there was a correction made, so nobody was improperly paid too much overtime or improperly paid too little overtime.
To the best of our ability, correct.
So to the best of your ability, since December of 2011,
I'm not here at that time.
well, are you aware of any mistakes in overtime payments since December of 2011 from your review of all these records?
Yeah.
People have actually been paid wrong? Or has it been corrected before they were paid?
I would say that there are several instances where individuals were paid hours that were different than what's on their signed pensions.
And so what did the city do? Go back to those people and say, well, there's been a mistake made?
Sometimes, and then adjustments made.
Sometimes, not all the time.
Again, I was only asked to review one employee for the auditor for a specific time period, and you're asking me to suddenly have instant knowledge of every payroll record that's ever been submitted since before I was employed.
How about Public Works? Did you look in that department to see if anybody's been paid improperly?
I
Any
didn't-
mistakes were made there?
The auditor's office did not ask about the public works department. They only asked about one employee in the police department.